You're climbing the stairs of your apartment complex. As you near your door, the lights flicker. You find yourself back at the building's entrance. You climb again. The lights flicker. And you're back in the lobby. You need my help. This is A Voice from Darkness. Hello all, this is Dr. Malcolm Ryder, parapsychologist, here tonight not to answer your questions regarding the supernatural, paranormal, and otherworldly, but to continue a story we started recently regarding the Ravenswood Reliquary. Now, when I started telling this tale of a girl inflicted with Sleeping Beauty sickness, I thought it little more than an interesting curiosity. At that time, I had no idea the far-reaching consequences of what befell Natalie Edwards. I could explain more, but perhaps it's better for you just to hear the story unfold for yourself. And so, let's begin. To remind you what happened in our last episode, on June 4th, 1926, the town of Ramway, South Carolina, collectively fell asleep and shared the same dream. This phenomenon repeated itself every night thereafter. It became clear that 16-year-old Natalie Edwards was the cause. Dr. Sidney Rogers from Ravenswood University paid a visit to the town and tried to convince first Natalie's parents and then her that she had a disease known as Sleeping Beauty sickness. But unfortunately, in both cases, he was unpersuasive. However, Jim Hailstrom, owner and operator of the Circus of Wandering Dreams, who had his own talent with dreams, that is, altering objects in dreams and pulling them into the waking world, convinced Natalie to run away with him and join his circus, so she might learn to become an even more powerful dreamer. Meanwhile, Dr. Rogers was put in jail, as he was suspected of doing something to Natalie to cause her disappearance. And we'll pick it up from there. 3 weeks after Dr. Rogers had been falsely imprisoned under the suspicion of abducting Natalie Edwards, a woman wearing a long skirt and a wide-brimmed hat exited the train at the Ramway depot. People went out of their way to avoid her, though if they'd been asked, few would have been able to articulate why. The woman beneath the wide-brimmed hat did not stop to make small talk with anyone, but with a dark determination in her step, headed straight to the sheriff's office. On duty was a single deputy who smirked when the woman introduced herself as Susan Whitmore, the head librarian of Ravenswood University. She explained that she was there on behalf of her and Dr. Rogers' employer to get him out of Ramway's jail immediately. She produced a request to that effect from the university's legal department, but the deputy scarcely read the document before tossing it onto his desk. He looked past the librarian to Rogers, who stood at the iron bars of his cramped cell. "You told me that school of yours was a weird one. Well, now I gotta agree. They send an old schoolmarm instead of a lawyer." The deputy turned back to Susan Whitmore. "I'll give your paper to the sheriff when he's in tomorrow. If you want to swing by then, I suppose you could tell him about the Dewey Decimal System or whatever it is you plan to." The deputy abruptly went silent. The woman was standing still before him, but he swore he saw her shadow stretch and twist, contort itself into alien shapes he had no words for. He wanted to tell himself he was just imagining things, that the low lights or too much coffee was stirring his imagination. But he was certain he saw the librarian's shadow stalk from one side of her to the other, prowling like a ravenous dog. "I'd prefer that you take the paper I handed you," Susan Whitmore said. "File it away and let the doctor out." The deputy heard her words, but his attention was primarily fixed on her shadow. Without another word, he let Dr. Rogers out of his cell. Less than an hour later, in a private couchette of a train heading north, Susan Whitmore told her freed colleague, "6 nights ago, a circus entered Belfast, New York. A man in a brightly colored suit waving a cane promised the circus's newest star, a young woman, could give everyone there the greatest dream of their lives. And, in addition, that he could then make their dream a reality." "And what became of Belfast?" Rogers asked. "The mayor begged the circus's pardon, but told them they were broke. No one in town had any kind of wealth, and especially none to hand over to a circus. Hailstrom brushed aside these protests and said they were offering their services for free in an effort to make the world a better place. He then asked the town, 'Is your lack of money the primary cause of your woes?' To which all of Belfast agreed. And so, Hailstrom told them, 'Then we'll just have to do something about that.'" Again, Rogers asked what occurred after. In their collective dream, Natalie Edwards turned the main street of Belfast into a road of golden bricks. And Jim Hailstrom brought this rich road into reality upon awakening. Rogers stirred his tea, waiting. From his academic study, he knew stories rarely ended happily when one's dreams came true, no matter what the fairy tales said. Susan Whitmore continued. "The people of Belfast then proceeded to murder and bludgeon each other all over this newly made gold. Dozens were killed, hundreds injured." The Doctor of Dreams closed his eyes and sipped his tea, and then asked, "And the circus?" "Last spotted heading north out of Belfast. So far they have not been seen since." "Hailstrom wants to train Natalie Edwards some more before she attempts such a feat again. That's my guess," Rogers said. "It's possible he's not a malevolent force, not like some we've encountered before." He looked down at the librarian's shadow as he said those words. "Oh, he's a self-taught novice at best," Whitmore said, "and he's attempting to mentor a girl who is far more powerful. It's like a matchstick trying to teach a forest fire how to safely burn. He'll set the world on fire, whether he intends to or not, and that is even assuming his intentions are honorable." "And how should we find them before they decide to visit another community?" Rogers asked, but he excitedly raised his hand before he'd finished asking the question. "Wait, I have it." He rose and grabbed his Gladstone bag from the luggage rack. I didn't bring much with me on my trip to Ramway, but I acquired something recently. A black stone necklace I believe could be of help. No, Susan Whitmore said. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly. Her shadow split in two. Then 4, all replicas of her silhouette. She looked down at them. Go. Search for them. And with those words, her shadows flew out the window of the moving train. She turned back to him. He could not hide his shock from her. The university has forbidden any further use of your shadow magic. After what happened, you said nothing when I used it to get you out of your jail cell. I believe that was different. I do too, Susan retorted. That was a trivial matter and likely didn't require much coercion. But this, finding our sleeping beauty before she does massive harm in the land of dreams and the waking world, that requires urgency, to say the least. I will not constrain myself from using whatever resources are needed. If you disagree with my conduct, I suggest you write a letter to the university's ethics board. Let's just find the girl, Roger said. Find her and that damned circus. The circus of wandering dreams' brightly painted wagons formed a circle in the forest clearing. A dark, starless sky loomed overhead, but kerosene lanterns flickered light across the sward onto the nomadic community of entertainers. Quick and dexterous jugglers practiced their craft in the low light, clowns tumbled over in rehearsal of their pratfalls, and stoic roustabouts moved about in the shadows, checking wagon wheels, inventorying tent spikes, and performing the other thankless tasks of circus life. Jim Hailstrom strolled through the lively encampment with cane in hand, trailing by his side his protege and the newest wanderer to join the circus, their sleeping beauty, now dressed in a beautiful dark blue flowing ball gown with silver moons and stars woven into the fabric. But Natalie's dark sunken eyes betrayed that she had not slept for days. You did well in the last town, my dear, Hailstrom said over his shoulder. But we'll rest here in the wilderness for a spell. Give you more time to rehearse your gift. Natalie turned to the south, looking back the way they'd come, and shivered. All those people, when they woke and saw the gold road, they... Never mind what they did after our wagons rolled out of town. It wasn't your fault. You gave them a gift, the means to improve their own lives. But they killed each other. There were probably enough gold bricks there for everyone there to have one, perhaps even 2. Hailstrom abruptly stopped, tapped his cane on the soft earth, and looked off into the dark distance. You're right, my dear. You're right. And you know what that means, don't you? That we can't do this again. I can't make people go into dreams with me. I need to live alone somewhere, or perhaps go to that university and learn to turn my dreaming off. This was a mistake. Hailstrom grimaced, but then forced himself to laugh. No, that's not right at all, he said. You're lucky I'm here. You're like a small twinkling star in the black sky, but You have the potential to be the sun, the source of all light for a whole world. I can tell you're something special. But the people we're killing, if people are killing themselves over gold, over riches, over anything we can give them, then it's because we haven't given them enough. So we must give them more. You need to dream bigger, my dear. You need to go from twinkling little star to fiery sun for the good of the world. Hailstrom paced around the young woman, tapping his cane in a slow rhythm. I had a dream once, he said, long ago, when I was a bit younger than you. To tell you the truth, it drove me mad. In this dream, I stumbled through a dense forest and into a clearing, one not unlike the clearing we're conversing in now, only in my dream, it stood on a precipice overlooking a great city, a shining white city with towers that pierced the heavens, castles that climbed over mountains and deep into valleys, mansions never-ending, paths and roads that led anywhere and everywhere anyone might want to travel, in this life or any other. And the people who lived in this grand city, they sang joyously. Their voices caused a sickness in me. It was so great and so terrible. The feeling caused me to waken. All my life, I've hoped to have that dream again, especially after I discovered my gift for bringing dreams into reality. But now that I've found you, I don't need to find that beautiful city again. You and I, we can make it. With the power of the people whose dreams we weave together, we can build that utopia I once envisioned. Natalie took a step back. She was uncertain of how she felt about the vision Hailstrom painted. Could she really dream something like that into reality? And even if she could, should she? I don't know if I can dream that big, she said. It was hard enough to concentrate on the gold brick road you asked me for. Concentration. Dream bigger, Hailstrom muttered to himself. Then his eyes went bright. Oh, I have just the solution. I'm a fool for not bringing it to you before. Follow me. Hailstrom led her to one of the circus wagons. Wooden boards covered its sides, and so the circus owner indicated for two roustabouts to remove them. At first, the broad-shouldered men did not move, as if they were fearful of the wagon. But Hailstrom insisted again that they do as they were told, and the two carnival workers stepped forward and did their work, more afraid of Jim Hailstrom. After the boards were removed, Natalie could see this wagon was different from most, as it was hollow in the center, so one could gaze right through. Inside was a pipe organ, and sitting at the organ's bench, fingers raised, ready to play, was a devil, whose body was made out of cogs and gears, with a face of red painted plaster, black horns, and a fiercely bright grin. "Isn't it marvelous?" Hailstrom said. "What is it?" Natalie asked. "Why, it's the most majestic instrument in the world. A circus calliope. The very sound of fun and entertainment. The embodiment of everything joyful in the world. For years and years I knew my circus lacked something special. Then one night while dreaming, I heard the most sublime melody. As I listened, a thick fog overwhelmed me, blinded me. Despite this, I felt compelled to tread towards the strange sound. So I stumbled through the fog, the music growing louder and louder. And that's when I came across this magnificent nightmare machine, with old Scratch there, dancing his fingers across the keys. And you know what strange thing happened next?" Natalie shook her head. "As I touched the wagon, he looked at me, gave me a little mechanical nod, and the music changed. Became bright and cheerful. No, not that. Joyful, familiar and joyful. It was the same song I'd heard all those years before in my other dream, the one of the grand and beautiful white city. The fog cleared then, and when I awoke, the calliope was with me, and still playing that joyful song. Isn't that miraculous?" Natalie took a step back. "The devil came to you in a dream, and you brought him into the waking world?" Hailstrom laughed. "He's not the real devil, my dear. Old Scratch there, he's just a contraption, a clockwork toy, no more sentient than a music box. Still, most of the workers are frightened of him, as have been many of the children in the towns we've meandered through. So I had to temporarily cease his joyful music. But perhaps it's time for that joy to be heard again." Hailstrom climbed into the wagon and turned a hand crank. When he stopped turning, the mechanical devil's hands jerked into motion. They moved across the organ keys, hovering at first, then with an unnatural smoothness. Unnatural because it was so natural. They began pressing down. A song unlike anything Natalie had ever heard before pulsed through the calliope's pipes. It filled her with a sweet nausea, as if she'd eaten too much candy from her parents' shop. And then the plaster devil's head twisted ever so slightly, and its eyes fell on her. She took a step back. "I don't know," she said. Hailstrom gave the girl the same dark look he'd given the roustabouts not long before. "What do you mean, you don't know?" he said. "You don't know if you want your incredible talent to be a gift for all mankind? You don't know if you'd just prefer to go back home and be a burden on your parents, on your community, selfishly forcing them to endure whatever dreams waft through your still childish mind. Is that what you'd prefer to bringing utopia to mankind? Is that what you don't know? No, that's not what I mean, Natalie started. Good, Hailstrom said. I'd hate for all this to be a waste. No, I am right in this matter, as I typically am. When you sleep tonight, you'll drift off to the delightful sound of the calliope. It'll strengthen you, inspire you, I'm sure. Perhaps you'll even glimpse the city we intend to build. And on the morrow, let us move our circus once again, find a rightful place for us to start building our grand city. Hailstrom turned to his circus workers. Get ready for us to move after sunrise. Where are we? Vermont? Let us travel eastward, as Cain once did. We will make New Hampshire our land of Nod. The circus workers put away what little they'd unpacked in the past hours and prepared themselves to move. All became busy, readying for travel. So busy, in fact, that none saw the shadow of a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, wandering amongst the shadows cast by the kerosene lamps of the brightly painted wagons. The land of Nod turned out to be Faraday, New Hampshire, a small town a stone's throw from the Vermont border. For Jim Hailstrom, everything was perfect. It was twilight hour, which gave enough light for the crowd to see him atop his wagon as he gestured wildly with his cane and raised and lowered his voice to hold the public's attention. The people of Faraday dismissed him at first as he went on about dreams and turning their town into a utopia, the first of many if all went well. He insisted how blessed they were that he, his partner in circus, chose their state, their town, of all in the nation, to be first. Natalie, meanwhile, rocked back and forth listlessly, her hands twisted into her moon and stars ball gown. When she had fallen asleep the previous night, she woke shortly after, afraid of the dream the calliope music had given her, one where she was alone in a dense fog. Through the fog, she was sure she saw the tall white towers he'd described. But she was afraid she would not ultimately discover that city, but instead find the devil waiting for her, and not merely a plaster-headed replica. A few of Faraday's residents were whispering, gold brick streets, never-ending castles, utter nonsense. Yes, Hailstrom assured them, that is what we offer you. We are not your typical circus bringing you joy and entertainment but for a single night. No, we are here to fix your small society, to give you everything you could ever want, to turn Faraday into a utopia, the first of many, I should hope. But his attention was broken. Unnaturally dark shadows moved across the crowd and gathered themselves behind a woman wearing a wide-brimmed hat. She walked next to someone Hailstrom recognized. "Who is that?" the circus man asked. "That's the man who came to see my parents and me the same day you did," Natalie said. "The dream professor, yes, I remember now. I made him look a clown before. I shall do so much worse now if he has come to put a stop to our dreams." Dr. Rogers and Susan Whitmore pushed their way through the crowd to the front near the circus wagons. "Miss Edwards! Miss Edwards!" Rogers shouted as they approached. "Natalie!" Susan Whitmore called to the girl, her shadows dancing in a mesmerizing rhythm to a silent melody. Natalie Edwards could not look away from the librarian. "How would you like to have as much control over your dreams as I do, my shadows? My friend, Dr. Rogers here, can help you. Would you like that?" "Yes," Natalie whispered. "Yes," she said again and broke into tears. "I don't want to be part of the circus anymore. I don't want people to kill themselves because of the things I dream." She turned to Jim Hailstrom. "I don't want to help you build your awful dream city." "No!" Hailstrom yelled. He grabbed Natalie by the shoulders and shook her. "You insolent, selfish girl! You'd take away our chance for the perfect society, the perfect world. We are so close. We are on the precipice. The music! The music!" Jim Hailstrom pointed his cane at the calliope wagon. The mechanical devil nodded, and his fingers moved from one chord to another. From a hidden pocket in his brightly colored coat, Hailstrom produced a strange powder and blew it in Natalie's face. "Sleep," he said. "All of us shall sleep, and we will awaken in a greater world." Natalie Edwards stood alone in a thick fog. Dark, slow music drifted from unseen calliope pipes. She imagined the hideous organist striking the keys with his clockwork hands. She tried to wake herself as she'd done the previous night, but to no avail. A cold hand reached from the fog and gripped her wrist. The master of wandering dreams stepped forward. He smiled triumphantly. "Yes," he said, "these are the perfect conditions. You've been awake for days. Your sleep now is deep, likely as powerful as it's ever been, and that beautiful music." "It's hideous," Natalie said. "Oh, but the music is a map, the way, our guide back to that fair city. You know what to do here, my dear. Build our utopia. Build grand and tall towers and castles that all might live in. Make riches so trivial, so ever-present, none would ever think of stealing ever again. Build my utopia. utopia, so I might birth it into reality. His grip on her wrist strengthened. For a frightful moment, a terrifying vision came into her mind. She saw the city Hailstrom had described, the white towers and castles, the twisting roads, but it all lay in ruins. The towers scattered across the earth and covered in dirt, the castle keeps caved in, and crawling through the wreckage were monstrous creatures mocking the shape of man. Natalie tried to break free of Hailstrom's grip, but he refused to let go. But then a shadow rose through the fog and tore his hand from her. Step away from the girl, Susan Whitmore said, and came forward. Jim Hailstrom did not move away. Instead, he laughed and waved his cane. It turned into a long, slender sword. With a quick and fierce stab, it pierced the center of Susan Whitmore's shadow. The librarian shuddered and stumbled back. We're in the land of dreams, not shadows, he said. Foolish of you to think you could interfere. Hailstrom pressed forward, again reaching for Natalie. Come, my dear, no more delays. Let us remake the world. But another hand offered itself to her. Dr. Rogers, wearing a black stone necklace. Come with me, he said. And she took his hand. The sun was still hours from rising, and a thick fog now filled Faraday. Natalie stumbled forward, away from Dr. Rogers, who stood silently behind, clutching the black stone necklace with one hand. Half surprised, his action had actually worked. Susan Whitmore stepped out of the fog and joined the other two. She winced with pain. Even though no injury showed itself on her body, her shadow clung to her like an injured child. Where have all the circus wagons gone? The calliope? Natalie asked. Whitmore and Rogers looked around, only then realizing all the circus wagons were gone, as was the calliope music. But dozens of Faraday residents still remained, sleeping on the ground. In the land of dreams still, Dr. Rogers said, or possibly forever. That devil wagon of Jim Hailstrom's, it looked at me as I grabbed you and pulled you out of the dream. I swear that plaster face went from smiling to unquenchable anger in the blink of an eye. I wonder if it'll take some vengeance out on Jim Hailstrom and his circus for denying it the ability to claim you, to use your power. The fog was slowly dissipating. Natalie Edwards, my offer still stands, Dr. Rogers said. You can come back with us to Ravenswood if you'd like to learn more about your ability and how to control it. Or, if you'd prefer, we'll escort you to Ramway and your parents. I can't go home, Natalie said. Not until I know how to control my dreaming. Then Ravenswood is the place for you, Susan said. Dr. Rogers is the best scholar of dreams and finest mentor to this past generation of Oneironauts. Come with us, and you'll be in a long, fine blade pierced through the front of Dr. Rogers. He peered down, confused. His eyes rolled back in his head as his legs collapsed and his body fell forward. Behind him stood Jim Hailstrom. Do you not think I too have the power to leave dreams of my own will? The calliope music made it difficult, but not impossible. I had not the strength to bring my circus out of the dream with me, but never mind them now. I don't need them anymore. My dear, he looked to Natalie. All I need is you. You remain my golden goose to create anything in this world, and now you have no other options. The doctor is dead. If you want to know anything about dreams, you must work with me, even if the thought of doing so is repulsive to you. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes. Do you want to go with this man? Susan Whitmore asked the girl, who shook her head. No. I didn't think so. In that case, please close your eyes and step away for a moment. Natalie obeyed. Before, in the land of dreams, you held perhaps the slightest of advantages. But here, this is a land of darkness where shadows claim dominion. Though there was scarcely any light in the Faraday town square, the black shadow of the librarian was unmistakable and impossible to miss as it stretched toward Jim Hailstrom, who helplessly flicked his sword at the ephemeral abyss in the shape of a woman wearing a wide-brimmed hat. When nothing of Jim Hailstrom remained on the earth, Susan Whitmore searched around. The fog was clearing, but Natalie was nowhere to be seen. The librarian called out to her, but the Sleeping Beauty was nowhere to be found. Three years would pass before the Ravenswood librarian saw Natalie Edwards again. To her surprise, the young woman had never left New Hampshire. Susan Whitmore found her on a small farm, the nearest neighbors several miles away and on the other side of tall, rolling hills. Natalie was feeding the chickens when the librarian drove down the dirt road. The Sleeping Beauty, who'd worn an elegant gown while a circus attraction, now instead had on a simple cotton dress, stained with sweat and dirt, her hands rough and nails broken. "It's not my farm," Natalie said as she led Susan into the kitchen for a glass of lemonade. "The old man whose place it is, he needs a little help around the farm, and the best part? He's never had a dream in his entire life. If you can believe that. He doesn't fall asleep when I do. He doesn't come into my dreams. When I told him I could do all these fantastic things, he thought I was just a girl telling stories. Oh, but now that you're here, Miss Whitmore, you can tell Gus I was being truthful, can't you? He's out mending a fence now, but he'll be in for lunch." Susan took a sip of lemonade and said, "You know that's not why I searched you out again." The girl shook her head. "No," she said. "I didn't think you came all this way for nothing. The loss of Sid, Dr. Rogers, is great. For someone who had precious few gifts in dreaming himself, he understood them better than most. Without him at Ravenswood, I'm not sure there is anyone there who could help you now. Then why did you come? Have you ever heard of the dark metaphysics? The librarian asked. She explained that it's a long-believed theory that all the supernatural is composed of shadow, mirror, dream, memory, flesh, and spirit. Further, it said that these are the base metaphysical components of all human beings. Each person is composed of equal parts of all six. However, once in a while, some have a little more of one or two of these elements. In such cases, that abundance manifests in strange ways. You mean like if someone had too much of the dream metaphysic, they'd maybe put everyone around them to sleep and cause them all to share a single dream? Exactly so. Again, why are you here, Miss Whitmore? Natalie asked. From her bag, Susan Whitmore produced a black-bladed knife. Long ago, some realized it was necessary to intercede with some imbalances of the dark metaphysics in some people. Metaphysical surgeons would perform elaborate rituals to remove one's shadow or spirit or dreams if they were impacting an individual or a community in a detrimental way. But this practice was later called barbaric, evil, and so its secrets were lost to time. But then how do you... Shadows exist across all time and space, and all shadows are part of the same shadow. And they whisper their secrets across time and space. Try to listen and it will likely drive you mad, but learn how to hear the voices in the darkness and not fall into madness, and you can discover truths that cannot be learned any other way. Why are you here? Natalie asked again. Why did you come seek me out at this farmhouse? Did you come to offer me the chance to have a normal life? The librarian stared coldly. I didn't come to offer you a choice. I'm going to cut out your dreams and bury them here in New Hampshire. But I'm fine now. I'm fine. I live a simple life far away from everyone. And Jim Hailstrom, there will be another Jim Hailstrom. There was one before him with a different name, but the same dream. And there will be another after, and another after that. And I am getting old. I will not leave a weapon like you lying ready for the next Jim Hailstrom to come, take, and destroy the world with. Natalie thought of running, but she saw then shadows in every corner of the room, waiting for her to try and run. What will happen to me? She asked. You will never have another nightmare again, Susan Whitmore said as she raised the black-bladed knife. On an obscure farm in New Hampshire, there's a tombstone that shows the year of death for Natalie Edwards as 1929, the same year Susan Whitmore paid her a visit. In some sense, Natalie Edwards did die that day, but all that was buried in that coffin were a girl's dead dreams. Someone else walked away from that farm, someone who shared the same spirit, flesh, shadow, reflection, and memories that Natalie once had. Just not her dreams. No one knows what that person's name was, who they were, how long they lived, or what kind of life they had. Susan Whitmore kept no notes of this journey or the radical action she took. In order that I might find out some of the dark truths at the heart of this tale, I had to consult not books or witnesses, but shadows of the past. I started this story by telling you of an item in the Ravenswood reliquary, a diamond rose pulled from a dream, a thing of beauty created by Jim Hailstrom. And this second part of the story, too, has a corresponding relic in the vaults beneath my alma mater. Weeks before, fog famously filled all of New Hampshire, causing all to drift into a sleep that has not yet ended. The plaster devil head of Hailstrom's mechanical calliope player appeared in the town square of Faraday. At the time, it was seen as a bad omen. If only they knew just how bad it would become for that poor state. I'm Dr. Malcolm Ryder, parapsychologist. Join us next episode when I will be answering your questions regarding the supernatural, paranormal, and otherworldly on A Voice from Darkness.